When 17-year-old Cassie walked into a room full of leather-clad bikers and asked to ride with them, the laughter was instant. But when her father's motorcycle thundered into the parking lot moments later, every joke died in their throats. Because the patch on his jacket told a story none of them could ignore, and Cassie was about to prove she was worthy of carrying it forward. The door to Rusty's bar groaned open, letting in a slice of autumn sunlight that cut through decades of cigarette smoke and spilled beer. Cassie stepped inside, her sneakers squeaking against sticky floorboards, and every conversation died. She was used to being underestimated. At barely 5 feet and 17 years old, with her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and a worn notebook clutched against her chest, she looked like she'd wandered into the wrong building. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club had gathered for their weekly meeting, and the sight of this girl, clean, young, determined, was so out of place it bordered on absurd. "Lost, sweetheart," a bearded man at the bar called out, and laughter rippled through the room. Cassie's heart hammered, but she'd prepared for this. "I'm looking for the Iron Wolves. I have a proposal." More laughter. Someone muttered something about Girl Scouts and cookies. Derek, a younger member with arms covered in fresh ink, leaned back in his chair. "This ought to be good." She moved to the center of the room, forcing herself to meet their eyes. "I'm a senior at Lincoln High. For my final project, I'm documenting American subcultures. I want to ride with you, observe, tell your stories." The room erupted, not with anger, but with the kind of laughter that comes from pure disbelief. A school project? This kid wanted to tag along on their rides like some kind of anthropologist studying exotic animals? "Honey, this ain't a petting zoo," an older woman named Maria said, though her tone was gentler than the others. Cassie opened her mouth to respond when a sound cut through everything else, the deep, unmistakable rumble of a Harley-Davidson approaching. Not just any bike. The engine had a specific growl, a rhythm the Iron Wolves knew in their bones. The laughter stopped. Graham walked in, and the air itself seemed to rearrange around him. He was 58, with silver threading through his beard and eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. The leather cut he wore was faded, patches stitched with the care of someone who understood that some things were sacred. On his back, the Iron Wolves emblem sat above a smaller patch. Founding member, 1971. He looked at Cassie, then at the room. "Dad," Cassie said quietly. The word landed like a grenade. Hank, the oldest member present, let out a long breath. "Well, hell." Derek's smirk vanished. Maria straightened. The dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone knew it. You didn't laugh at a founding member's daughter, not without consequences. Graham moved to stand beside Cassie, and she caught the familiar scent of motor oil and leather. He didn't touch her, didn't offer comfort, but his presence was a shield nonetheless. "You want to tell them, or should I?" he asked her. Cassie swallowed hard. This was her moment. "My project isn't just about motorcycles or leather jackets. It's about what happens when soldiers come home and the world doesn't make sense anymore. It's about the men who gave my father a reason to keep breathing when the VA couldn't. It's about the brotherhood that saved his life." The room went still in a different way now. Several members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they'd expected. Graham's voice was rough. 71. "I came back from Saigon with more ghosts than memories. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't work. Couldn't figure out how to be human again." He paused. "These men taught me, gave me purpose. A family when I couldn't recognize my own." Hank stood slowly, his weathered face thoughtful. "The girl wants to understand. Maybe that's not the worst thing." "It's club business," Derek argued. "We don't need some kid writing about us for extra credit." "It's not extra credit," Cassie said, finding her voice again. "It's everything. My dad never talks about the war, never talks about how he survived it. But I've heard the bikes on Sunday mornings. I've seen how he changes when he comes back from rides. I want to understand the thing that gave me back my father." Maria's expression softened. Others nodded slowly. Even Derek couldn't find a quick comeback. Graham looked at his daughter with something like pride mixed with concern. "It won't be easy. Long rides, early mornings. We don't slow down for anyone." "I know. And you'll earn your place. Being my daughter gets you in the door." Everything after that is on you. I understand. Hank raised his beer. Then I say we give her a shot. Anyone objects? The silence was answer enough. Derek looked away, jaw tight, but said nothing. Cassie felt something release in her chest. She'd done it. The hard part, she thought, was over. She had no idea the journey had only just begun. The first ride nearly broke her. Cassie had imagined something romantic. Wind in her hair, open roads, freedom. Reality was cramping legs, a sore back, and the constant anxiety of keeping up with riders who'd been doing this for decades. She rode behind her father on his Harley, gripping tight as they took Highway 9 through the mountains, her notebook sealed in a waterproof bag strapped to her chest. 3 hours in, they stopped at a rest area. Cassie climbed off stiffly, trying not to show how much everything hurt. Maria appeared beside her, offering water. First long ride always kicks your ass, Maria said, lighting a cigarette. You'll adapt. Or you won't. I'll adapt, Cassie said, perhaps too quickly. Maria studied her through smoke. Your dad tell you why I'm here? Why they let me in? Cassie shook her head. 1978. My husband rode with them. He died on this highway, drunk driver crossed the median. I showed up to his memorial ride wearing his cut, and nobody knew what to do with me. She exhaled slowly. I told them I wasn't leaving, that my old man's legacy was mine to carry too. Took 2 years before they stopped treating me like a ghost. How'd you change their minds? Didn't change anything, just kept showing up. Eventually, they realized I wasn't performing grief. I was living it. Same as them. Maria flicked ash. You're not here to play dress up either. I can see that. But Derek? He doesn't see it yet. As if summoned, Derek appeared, pulling off his helmet. We're burning daylight. Some of us have actual jobs tomorrow. The ride continued. Cassie's muscles screamed, but she didn't ask to stop. At a diner outside Millbrook, the group spread across booths, and Cassie finally pulled out her notebook. This was why she'd come. Hank slid into the seat across from her, coffee steaming between his weathered hands. You want stories? I'll give you one. He told her about his younger brother, Jimmy, how they'd bought matching bikes in '69, how Jimmy died 3 months later when a tire blew on Interstate 40. Graham found me 2 days after the funeral, sitting in my garage with a bottle and my brother's helmet. Didn't say much, just sat there, came back the next day, and the next, eventually dragged me to a ride. Told me Jimmy wouldn't want his bike gathering dust. Is that when you joined? Cassie asked, writing quickly. That's when I learned what these men really are. Not rebels, not outlaws, just people who understand that grief is easier when you're moving forward. Across the diner, her father sat with 3 other vets, their conversation low and serious. Cassie caught fragments, mentions of names she didn't recognize, places that sounded like military bases. This was a side of Graham she'd never accessed, a language spoken only among those who'd shared certain experiences. The waitress brought food, and Derek deliberately sat next to Cassie, crowding her space. Getting what you need for your little report? It's not a report. It's documentation, right? Documentation. He bit into his burger aggressively. You know what happens when outsiders write about us? They get it wrong. Make us look like criminals or clowns. Which one are you going for? Neither. I'm trying to understand. You can't understand, Derek interrupted. You're a tourist. You'll finish your project, get your grade, and forget we exist. Maria's voice cut across the table. Derek, that's enough. It's fine, Cassie said, meeting his eyes. You're right that I'm an outsider, but my dad trusted these men with his life. That means something to me. If I do this wrong, I'm not just failing a class. I'm failing him. So yeah, I'm going to get it right. Derek held her gaze, then looked away first. That night, back at the clubhouse, Cassie sat on a worn couch reviewing her notes while the others played pool and swapped stories. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mom asking if she was okay. She typed a response, then noticed her father stepping outside to take a call. Through the window, she watched his body language shift. Tense, surprised. When he returned, Hank intercepted him. That who I think it was? Hank asked quietly. Graham nodded slowly. Tommy heard about the project. Wants to talk. The name rippled through those close enough to hear. Tommy. Even Cassie recognized it. A name mentioned rarely, always followed by silence. After 15 years? Maria's voice was careful. Why now? Said he's been following the club's social media. Saw Cassie's been riding with us. Got him thinking about old times. Derek appeared from the back room. Tommy's got no business here anymore. He made his choice. We all made choices, Graham said tiredly. Maybe it's time to revisit them. Cassie filed the information away, sensing she'd stumbled onto something important. A story within the story. A wound that hadn't healed. As the evening wound down and members departed, Graham found Cassie gathering her things. You holding up okay? He asked. Sore, but good. He nodded, then hesitated. This thing with Tommy, it's complicated. Old history. I'm listening. Not tonight, but soon. You want the whole story, you'll get it. Just be patient. Cassie shouldered her bag, feeling the weight of what she'd learned today. This wasn't just about motorcycles or brotherhood anymore. It was about fractures and healing, about what happens when family breaks apart. And somehow, her project had become the catalyst for bringing it all back to the surface. Tommy arrived on a Thursday afternoon when the clubhouse was quiet. Cassie was there alone, transcribing interviews from her recorder, when she heard the unfamiliar bike pull up. Through the window, she watched a man in his mid-50s dismount. No club colors, just plain leather and cautious movements. He paused at the door, hand on the frame like he was touching something holy or haunted. Then he saw her through the glass and stepped inside. You must be Cassie, he said. His voice carried the same rough warmth as the other members, but underneath ran a current of nervousness. I'm Tommy. She stood, suddenly aware she was alone with a stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger at all. My dad mentioned you might call. I did better than call. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. 15 years is a long time to stay away. Figured if I was coming back, I should just show up. Before Cassie could respond, Graham's truck pulled into the lot. Her father emerged, froze when he saw Tommy's bike, then walked toward the clubhouse with deliberate steps. The door opened. The two men stood 3 feet apart, separated by a decade and a half of silence. Graham, Tommy. The air between them vibrated with everything unsaid. Finally, Graham exhaled. You want coffee? Yeah, coffee would be good. Within an hour, the clubhouse filled. Word traveled fast in the Iron Wolves. Tommy's return was the kind of news that demanded witnesses. Hank arrived first, embracing Tommy with a fierceness that made Cassie's throat tight. Maria came next, more reserved but clearly moved. Others trickled in, until the room held nearly 20 members spanning 3 decades of club history. Derek was the last to arrive, and his entrance shifted the temperature. Didn't think I'd see you again, he said flatly. Didn't think I'd be back, Tommy admitted. So why now? Tommy looked at Cassie. Heard about the project. About Graham's daughter documenting the club's history. Made me realize our history includes the parts we don't talk about. The pieces we left broken. Derek's jaw tightened. My father died believing you betrayed this club. The room went silent. Cassie had been taking notes, but her pen stilled. This was the wound, raw and open after all these years. Tommy didn't flinch. Your father and I disagreed about the club's direction. That's true. I wanted us to be more than weekend warriors, to use what we'd learned, what we'd survived, to help other vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. He thought that made us social workers instead of riders. You wanted to change everything we were, Derek shot back. I wanted us to evolve, Tommy corrected. To matter beyond ourselves. Graham spoke quietly. And I said nothing. When you two were tearing each other apart, when the club was splitting down the middle, I stayed neutral. Thought I was keeping the peace. He looked at Tommy. But my silence was a choice. It told you where I really stood. Tommy's eyes reddened. You were my best friend, Graham. 20 years of riding together. I needed you to back me up, and you disappeared into the middle ground. I know. I left because staying meant watching this brotherhood become something tribal and small. Every ride felt like picking sides. Hank cleared his throat. For what it's worth, we did start that veteran outreach program. 3 years after you left. Derek's father fought it right up until his heart attack. But we did it. Tommy looked stunned. You did. Wasn't the same without you, Maria added. But yeah, we help transition vets now. Connect them with resources, bring them on rides, give them community. It's small, but it's real. Cassie watched her father's face transform. Surprise, regret, something that looked like relief. We never told you, Graham said. Pride, I guess. Didn't want to admit you'd been right. Derek stood abruptly and walked out. The door slammed behind him. Tommy moved to follow, but Graham caught his arm. Give him time. He's carrying his father's anger because he doesn't know what else to do with his grief. The gathering broke into smaller conversations. Cassie found herself beside Maria, who was wiping her eyes. This is bigger than your project now, Maria said. You've opened something that needed opening. Later, as the sun set and members drifted home, Cassie discovered her father and Tommy in the garage bay, working on an old Sportster that had been sitting broken for months. They moved in synchronized silence, passing tools without asking, falling into patterns learned decades ago. She stayed in the doorway watching. Her father said something too quiet to hear. Tommy laughed, a real laugh, not the careful kind from earlier. Then Graham's shoulders shook, and Cassie realized he was crying. Tommy gripped the back of Graham's neck, and they stood there, two men holding each other up over an engine that might never run again. But that wasn't really the point. Cassie didn't write any of this down. Some moments weren't meant for documentation. They were meant to be witnessed and held sacred. Outside, she found Derek sitting on his bike, helmet in his hands. He's not the villain you need him to be, Cassie said carefully. My dad spent his last year angry. Tommy, at the club changing, at getting old. Derek's voice cracked. I thought if I kept that anger alive, I was honoring him. Maybe honoring him means letting it go. Derek looked at her. Really looked, for the first time since she'd arrived. You're tougher than you look. You know that? So I've been told. He started his bike, then paused. Your project. When it's done, I want to read it. Yeah. Someone should get the whole story right. He rode off into the twilight, and Cassie returned to the garage where her father and Tommy were still working, still healing, still finding their way back to what they'd lost. The bike coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The memorial ride had been an Iron Wolves tradition for 30 years, always the last Sunday in May, always ending at Riverside Veterans Cemetery. But 3 weeks after Tommy's return, Graham called an emergency club meeting and proposed something different. We move it up. Do it next month. Make it bigger this year. Hank raised an eyebrow. Why the rush? Graham glanced at Cassie, sitting quietly in the corner with her notebook. Because waiting for things to be perfect means they never happen. We've got Tommy back. We've got Cassie documenting who we really are. Let's honor our fallen while we're still here to do it right. The vote was unanimous. Preparation consumed the next 4 weeks. Cassie found herself deeply involved in ways she hadn't anticipated. Maria taught her about the patches, each one a story, a life, a legacy stitched into leather. They spent an afternoon in Maria's sewing room, surrounded by cuts bearing names of men who'd never ride again. This one was Hank's brother Jimmy, Maria said, running her fingers over faded thread. This was Derek's father, Bull. And this, she held up a patch that looked older than the others. This was the first member we lost. 1973. Kid named Casey, only 19. Cassie photographed each one, documenting not just the patches but Maria's hands, the needle and thread, the ritual of remembrance. Tommy and Graham spent their evenings in the garage, but now Derek joined them. The tension hadn't vanished completely, but something had shifted. One night, Cassie overheard Derek ask Tommy about the outreach program he'd envisioned. You really think we could make a difference? Derek asked, his voice stripped of its usual edge. I know we could, Tommy replied. Your father and I disagreed on method, not intention. He wanted to protect what we built. I wanted to expand it. We were both right. We were both wrong. Derek was quiet for a long moment. He never said he was proud of me. Not once. He didn't know how, Graham said gently. Some men, the war took their words, left them only actions. Then I'll have to be different, Derek decided. The night before the ride, Maria asked Cassie to come to the clubhouse alone. When she arrived, the core members were there: Graham, Hank, Tommy, Maria, and Derek. On the table lay her father's original cut, the founding member patch prominent on the back. "We've been talking," Maria said. "What you've done these past months goes beyond any school project. You've brought us back together, helped us remember who we are." Graham picked up the cut. "This has been mine for 54 years. Every mile, every brother, every loss. It's all in this leather." He held it out to Cassie. "I want you to have it." Cassie's hands trembled. "Dad, I can't." "You can. You will." His voice was firm but gentle. "But we're going to modify it first." Maria produced her sewing kit. With practiced hands, she began stitching beneath Graham's name on the patch, adding new thread in a complementary color. The needle moved steadily, creating letters that spelled out Cassie's name. "Legacy isn't about the past staying frozen," Tommy said. "It's about being carried forward by someone worthy." When Maria finished, she held up the cut. 2 names, 2 generations, 1 unbroken line. Cassie couldn't speak. She simply nodded, tears streaming freely. The memorial ride began at dawn. 73 motorcycles gathered at the clubhouse, the largest turnout in Iron Wolves history. Word had spread through veteran networks, and riders from neighboring chapters had come to pay respects. The rumble of engines was thunder given purpose. Cassie wore her father's cut, now their cut, with a pride that felt both enormous and humble. She rode beside Graham at the front of the procession, with Tommy on his other side and Hank just behind. The formation moved through town, a river of chrome and leather, drawing people to their windows and porches. At the cemetery, they gathered around a memorial stone engraved with names. Hank spoke first, his voice carrying across the assembled riders. Then Maria. Then others who needed to say names aloud to remember friends who'd become ghosts. When they finished, Graham nodded to Cassie. She stepped forward, her notebook open to pages worn from constant revision. "I came to the Iron Wolves to study a subculture," she began. "But what I found was a family built from broken pieces. Men and women who learned that the opposite of war isn't peace, it's connection." She read excerpts from her interviews, Hank's story about his brother, Maria's journey from widow to warrior, her father's confession about the darkness that nearly claimed him and the brothers who pulled him back. And then she read something new, written the night before. Tommy left because he believed in growth. Derek's father stayed because he believed in preservation. They were both trying to protect the same sacred thing. "What I've learned is that legacy isn't choosing between past and future. It's stitching them together with steady hands and refusing to let the thread break." Tommy and Derek stood side by side, and when Cassie finished, they clasped hands briefly. Not a resolution, but a beginning. The ride back was quieter, contemplative. At the clubhouse, members lingered over coffee and stories. Derek approached Cassie, his usual defensiveness replaced by something softer. "You coming back this summer?" he asked. "We could use help with the outreach program. Someone who knows how to tell stories right." Cassie looked at her father, who smiled. "Your choice, kiddo." She touched the patch on her back, feeling the weight of her name beside his. "Yeah, I'll be back." That night, sitting at her computer, Cassie opened her project file. 20,000 words documenting the Iron Wolves, but also documenting herself, how she'd arrived as an observer and left as something else entirely. She titled it simply, Brotherhood, a Legacy in Motion. Outside, she heard her father's Harley start up, joined moments later by another engine. Through the window, she saw Tommy pull up beside him. They exchanged nods, then rode off together into the evening, 2 old friends reclaiming miles they'd lost. Cassie saved her work and smiled. Some journeys never really end. They just keep moving forward, carrying everyone brave enough to hold on. Cassie learned that legacy isn't just about the past, but having the courage to carry it into the future, 1 mile at a time. Sometimes the greatest journeys aren't about the destination, but about honoring the road that was paved before you. What legacy would you fight to preserve? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that remind us of what truly matters.